Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you all are in the world. My name is Folashade Ambrose Medebem, Communication, Public Affairs and Sustainable Development Director for Lafarge Africa. You're most welcome to our webinar series today. It's our esteemed pleasure to welcome you all to this session. This is the second webinar of 4 in terms of our sustainability webinar series, discussing a decade for action, accelerating the SDGs in a post-pandemic era. Last week, the theme for the webinar was environmental and social governance, a transformative approach towards achieving the SDGs. Today, week 2, we will be discussing co-creating value through best practices in private-public partnership and impact assessment for the SDGs. Before I introduce our esteemed thought leaders and moderator, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping topics. This webinar is being recorded and we will share the link with you afterwards. We'd also like to invite you to scribe your questions and/or comments that you may have in the chat box, which you see at the bottom of the screen, and we can pose them to any of our thought leaders and speakers as and when necessary and at the time. On that note, I do have the pleasure of introducing members of our board who will be joining us and are joining us: Mr. Grant Earnshaw, Mr. Marco Licata, Mrs. Onyenkon Adewale, His Highness Sanusi Lamido Sanusi II, the UN SDG Advocate, Ms. Sanda Ojiambo, the Chief Executive of the United Nations Global Compact, Malam Adamu, the Honorable Minister of Education, ably represented by Mr. Mahmoud Mohammed, the Technical Advisor to the Honorable Minister, Ms. Magali Anderson, our Chief Sustainability Officer at Lafarge Holcim, and Professor Chris Ogbechi, the Lagos Business School Deputy Dean, and our host, CCEO, Lafarge Africa PLC, Khalid El-Dakani. Khalid, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you so much, Fola, and good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Again, it's my pleasure to welcome you all in our second webinar in Lafarge Africa Sustainability Series. And I'm honored to have the following thought leaders that Fola just mentioned, and I'm re-stressing my personal pleasure, as well as Lafarge Africa pleasure, to have His Highness Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, United Nations SDG Advocate, with us, Ms. Sanda Ojiambo, the Chief Executive of the United Nations of the Global Compact, Malam Adamu, the Honorable Minister of Education, represented by Mr. Mahmoud Mohammed, Ms. Magali Anderson, our Lafarge Holcim Chief Sustainability Officer, and finally, Mr. Professor Chris Ogbechi, Lagos Business School. Last week, our board chairman opened the series of our director. Ms. Onyenkon Adewale also joined us. This is further attests to Lafarge Africa commitment to environment, economic, social, and governance. Today, we are most delighted also to welcome 3 of our board members, Mr. Grant Earnshaw, Mr. Marco Licata, and Ms. Onyenkon Adewale. And to everyone who has joined us for today's session, thank you all for the participation, and we look forward to an engaging and insightful webinar today. Fola, back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Khalid. And without much further ado, I would like to invite our CEO to invite Ms. Sanda Ojiambo, please, to give her speech. Over to you, Khalid, please, to introduce her.
Well, it's our great pleasure to have Ms. Sandra with us. Mr. Sanda Ojiambo is the Chief Executive of the United Nations Global Compact and brings 20 years of experience to lead the compact, launched in July 2000. The United Nations Global Compact is a Secretary General's strategic policy and advocacy initiative calling for the alignment of the business operation and strategies with 10 universal principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. Today, Ms. Sanda will be sharing with us the role of the local networks in accelerating impact for the SDGs. There is no better time to be having this disclosure. It's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Ojiambo to deliver her address. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Thank you, Khaled, for the kind introduction, and Fola as well. To all of you distinguished panelists and those who are joining us, it's truly great to be able to join you today. So thank you for this invitation to talk about the role of the United Nations Global Compact and our local network partners, of which we're really proud that Lafarge is one, in accelerating impact for the Sustainable Development Goals. At this early stage, again, I'd like to thank Lafarge for organizing this initiative. I'm told that this is the second edition of such an initiative, and this has been further amplified and grown from the inaugural one that you had in 2019. A little bit about the United Nations Global Compact, although Khalid, you have ably really described it in just a few words, and I think that was fantastic. Again, founded in the year 2000 by former Secretary General Kofi Annan, the Global Compact was launched, as he said, to bring a human face to the global market. And this action was really aimed at bringing business and the United Nations together. And I'd like to say that over the past 20 years, the work of the Global Compact has really grown to demonstrate that business, when united, can be a powerful force for both business benefit as well as societal transformation. All participants of the UN Global Compact make a commitment at the highest level at the CEO office to uphold our 10 principles in support of human rights, labor, to protect the environment, and also to take a stand against corruption. And through country-based local networks in nearly 70 countries and more than 10,000 participating companies, we aim to accelerate progress on the 10 principles as well as the SDGs by mainstreaming corporate sustainability. Now, this year is an important year within the UN. It really marks the beginning of the decade of action. And this is the 10 years to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And I think we all know, panelists, we were just chatting about the challenges that COVID has brought to us, including not being able to interact. But we know that COVID has really set aside progress in terms of meeting the targets of the SDGs, such as eradicating poverty, reducing inequalities, and many other key goals. So as we all know, COVID-19 has really highlighted the imperative of the SDGs. It's even more clear now that we have to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals. This crisis actually threatens not just progress that was on hold, but actually threatens to reverse some of the progress that we have already made. But there is a glimmer of hope, because we firmly believe that if this COVID response is done correctly, and if it's guided by the SDGs, the recovery from COVID can put us on a more sustainable and inclusive path and really drive us toward that human face to the global market, which former Secretary General spoke so passionately about. What will this mean? We've heard the often used phrase of building forward better, building together, building stronger. It really means making stronger business partnerships and driving sustainable, inclusive, and gender equal societies. Allow me to say that I believe Nigeria has made enormous progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals, and indeed has become Africa's largest economy. First, I'd like to acknowledge the work of the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on Sustainable Development Goals. I recognize Her Excellency, the Senior Special Assistant, for her work and her commitment to bringing Nigeria to the forefront of economic and social impact in Africa. In addition, the Private Sector Advisory Group is one of the initiatives targeted at driving impact from her office. And I'm truly delighted to read about the investments of member organizations in this regard and the renewed vigor and drive towards accelerating impact for the SDGs. So today, really, my comments are a call to action for all of the companies present and organizations present in the private sector to leverage partnerships and achieve a greater sense of drive towards the Sustainable Development Goals. As the Secretary General Antonio Guterres acknowledged and said, public-private partnerships and multi-stakeholder partnerships are key to UN's business model. It means moving from one-off transactional partnerships to longer-term transformational cooperation. And that is truly what we at the UN Global Compact and our local networks aim to achieve. In Nigeria, the Global Compact local network has really become a platform for Nigerian companies, large and small, to advance a national vision of sustainable development. And I'm pleased to see high-profile companies in Nigeria, implementing responsible business practices, and reporting on their progress on social and environmental targets. Indeed, sustainability reporting is really picking up and is important for companies that are listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, allowing them to uphold commitments to public transparency and accountability. And even as business steps up, as we should in the call to action for the SDGs, government continues to play a key role, critical in advancing inclusive and sustainable business through public-private engagement. Government has the potential to provide an enabling environment in which sustainable companies can compete with others on a level playing field and indeed flourish. It is in this spirit that we have invited the government of Nigeria to join the UN Global Compact Government Group, which will then provide a platform for more closer strategic dialogue. The government's participation will allow us to respond more coherently and more directly to the country's sustainable development challenges. We look forward to this becoming a reality. Allow me to just talk a little bit about some of the fantastic work that the Global Compact Network Nigeria is doing. A series of broad initiatives designed to help Nigerian companies make meaningful commitments to sustainability, supported by, of course, our office in New York, as well as solid practices and policies. First, let me talk about financing for sustainable development. We all know that while we're committed to the SDGs, what is really critical is how we're able to mobilize sustainable financing to deliver on the SDGs. So in this area, business engagement with the private sector is even more important in this post-COVID-19 recovery. We recognize this, and we've taken bold steps to engage broader stakeholder groups around the issues of financing the SDGs. The UNGC convened a high-level meeting in London on the margins of the UK Africa Investment Forum in 2020 to discuss ways of financing the Continental Free Trade Agreement. That meeting was attended by representatives of the Nigeria Stock Exchange, I believe, who are key partners and collaborators for our work. The Global Compact Network Nigeria has also focused its anti-corruption efforts on micro, small, and medium enterprises. These, in many economies, make up the vast majority of businesses in country, and they are very important to the economy. But we have to acknowledge they have a relative vulnerability. To lend them a hand, the Nigeria Local Network has developed a toolkit with detailed guidance on improving anti-corruption and compliance practices. And since 2018, I'm told, more than 80 companies in Nigeria have been trained through a self-assessment toolkit. In addition, we're also taking a look at the area of gender equality. And in this regard, we launched the West Africa Gender Equality Initiative. This is in collaboration with Global Compact Network Ghana, UN Women, and various civil society organizations. This initiative helps companies assess their policies and practices to improve gender equality in their workplaces and communities. It also connects the private sector with the Ministries of Labor and the Ministry of Women in policy dialogue to discuss policies and partnerships to achieve SDG 5 on gender equality. Another important initiative that we are rolling out together is the Young SDG Innovators program. This is a 10-month accelerator program that is designed for young professionals working in companies where we have local networks, providing them with skills and tools to develop innovative solutions for business. It also gives them insights into creating new markets, new products and business models in service of sustainable development. And a final example, I think, which encapsulates all of this is the SDG Ambition, which is a platform initiative of the UN Global Compact. This global initiative works with companies in Nigeria and indeed worldwide to identify and set priorities for specific measurable actions that will accelerate the contribution of the private sector to achieving SDGs. So there's a number of propositions, platforms, and programs that together with the local network in Nigeria, we're truly pleased to roll out as concrete and sustainable pathways to delivering on sustainable development, but also in this very short term to addressing some of the very key challenges that have arisen due to COVID-19. Let me conclude with an open invitation to some of our upcoming virtual events taking place during this the high-level week of the UN General Assembly next month, September. We have 3 days of events that we have themed Uniting Business Live, where we'll convene leaders from business, from government, and civil society to demonstrate their commitment to the UN's mission and the 2030 agenda. We want to explore the key role that the private sector can play in delivering the SDGs and highlight opportunities for closer collaboration, and most importantly, to help companies move from commitment to action. I do hope you'll be able to join us. The information is available on the UNGC website. Once again, allow me to close by saying thank you, Lafarge, for this invitation. We acknowledge the important work that you do within Nigeria in support of the local network and indeed globally. It is a pleasure to be amongst the speakers, and I look forward to sharing more in the discussion to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Once again, we really appreciate your being with us today. The Chief Executive and Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact, thank you very much. Very emphatic call to action for all of us, as you stated. You obviously mentioned that the PPP is key to the UN business model. That's very fundamental. Nigeria, I'm happy that you said we're doing our bit and making sure we're playing our part, inclusive of the the local UNGC platform in Nigeria. So thank you very much once again. Moving on, we have this is a very interactive webinar series. We have a very short poll, which I think would come up on the page right now. We just have two particular questions that we'd like our participants and distinguished stakeholders to answer. And it's just two questions, and it should just take a few moments. As we all know, digital is instant, and we'll be able to get the response straight away. So the first question it's asking, please, is the global media doing enough in terms of sensitization and knowledge provision to the general public on the essence and overall objective of achieving the SDGs by 2030? The second question, the global consensus is that technology should be embedded across the educational experience. Are stakeholders exploring and initiating adequate partnership in this regard? So I do invite all our participants, please, to just vote. We'll just give it a few moments. And we should be having the answers, so poll results coming up on our screen very shortly. We did this last week and it was very insightful when we got the results as well. And here we are. So for the first question, it's an emphatic no. And so that's a call to action. And then the second answer as well is an emphatic no. We have a 44% skew to 13%. I can't scroll down to the bottom of the screen. Ah, it's a tie. I do beg your pardon. There's a tie there. So clearly overall, there's room for improvement. Thank you very much. We will always take all this information and include it in our report after the fourth webinar series. So without much further ado, thank you all for participating. Without much further ado, we're going to move into the webinar thought leadership segment. And we have the esteemed Professor Chris Ogbechi, who is the Deputy Dean of the Lagos Business School, with us. Professor Chris Ogbechi is a professor of strategic management at the Lagos Business School, Pan-Atlantic University. He is also a visiting professor at Strathmore Business School, Nairobi. He has vast experience in marketing, strategy, and corporate governance. He teaches strategy, sustainability, and corporate governance at the Lagos Business School, and is also the founding director of the School Sustainability Center. Professor Ogbechi has penned several journals on corporate governance and sustainability notably. Besides teaching and researching, he's also involved in community service and philanthropy. Professor Chris Ogbechi, thank you very much for moderating here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Shadi. The representative of the Honorable Minister of Education, the country head of Lafayette, Africa, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me join others in welcoming you to this special webinar. For me, it's an honor and privilege webinar on co-creating value through best practices in private-public partnership. This webinar is a great for leaders to help us explore ways various sectors of the economy can leverage opportunities, policies, for better value creation and impact that is far-reaching. And some of the issues we'll explore today include the role of corporate investors in creating a sustainable future that consistently assures good quality of living and bring about harmony among stakeholder groups. Innovation investors can adopt for effective impact assessment for SDGs. This session also aims to explore such partnership opportunities, leveraging the relationship and finding mutual grounds for co-creating value. Its overall outcome and the impact of such collaborations to the achievement of SDGs. Let me quickly remind ourselves that the SDGs represent a vision, an ambition, a target, and a measure for countries with regard to sustainable development and sustainable future. Delivery of public infrastructure and services is an important way through which Nigeria can work towards achieving their SDGs. The federal government is striving to involve the private sector in the provision of needed infrastructure and services. And PPP is the dominant model that will make this work. And for us, PPP is a method through which public infrastructure services can be delivered through the private sector. Why is it important in this COVID-19 era? Our country's economy contracted by 6% year on year in the second quarter of this year, which is the steepest decline in the last 10 years. Government revenue is challenged as a result of steep drop in oil prices. According to the Minister of Works, government is owing contractors about 177 billion naira. And so government cannot drive sustainable development alone. The United Nations and the international community recognize that achieving sustainable development will not be possible without the involvement of the private sector, and public-private partnership is critical. And as such, we need to look at what areas can PPP help us in this drive towards a sustainable future. We have a panel of thought leaders who will share their own experience, their own insights, and actually give us some food for thoughts to see how we can move this conversation forward. After Ms. Ojemba's illuminating talk on UNGC, PPP, and SDGs, we're not going to let her alone. She has to be part of this panel of thought leaders. So I would like to call her to be part of the thought leaders. And the other two people I would like to invite to join this panel. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Mahmoud Mohammed, who is the representative of the Honorable Minister of Education, Malam Adamu. Mr. Mohammed is the technical advisor to the Honorable Minister. And the next thought leader is Ms. Magali Anderson. Ms. Magali Anderson became a member of the Group Executive Committee of Lafayette Housekeeping in October 2019. She graduated as a mechanical engineer from SA in Lyon. So we have something in common. I'm also a mechanical engineer, and started her career as a offshore rigs in Nigeria. Interestingly, she spent 27 years in the oil and gas industry, mainly with Schlumberger, holding operational line management positions, including Angola, CEO and regional head, Europe, During her career, she also held several functional roles, including Vice President of Marketing and Sales, Vice President Shared Services Organization for the Europe and Africa region, and Global Head of Maintenance. Margalian Jessen joined Lafarge Wholesale as Group Head of Health and Safety in October 2016. Under her leadership, Lafarge health and safety performance has improved significantly. So you'll agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, that we have 3 thought leaders that can help us unmask these important subjects, PPP and SDGs. I will start by asking them several questions to throw up some insights. And after about 25 minutes of rounds of questions, I would invite members of the audience to also pass comments or ask our panelists questions. Let me start with the Honorable Minister, who is being represented here by his technical advisor. In the acceleration of the 2030 agenda, one phrase that was mentioned consistently was achieving the 2030 agenda with no one left behind. How can this be localized, inclusive, amongst all stakeholders? I hope you can hear me.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. Sorry about the network. I'm having a bad Murphy's Law day, I suppose, and the connection is being very poor. I hope you can hear me too. Yes,
you know something you can do? Just block your video so I can conserve some bandwidth, and that
yes,
will.
I'll do that. Yes. Yes, that's. I hope that's better. Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Hello, sorry, I didn't catch the last.
No, okay, so let me repeat the question. It said, in the acceleration of the 2030 agenda, one phrase that was mentioned consistently was achieving the 2030 agenda with no one left. How can this be localized, inclusive, and achievable amongst all stakeholders?
Okay.
Were you able to get that question? So it seems that we've lost him. Over to you, Sandra. From Nairobi.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, I have a question for you while we're trying to catch Ahmed. COVID has caused a shift and is likely to have impact in progressing the SDGs. What ways can accelerating and scaling up effective partnership across stakeholders be implemented with the objective to put us back on track in delivering transformational impact for SDGs?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And I have to acknowledge, I mentioned earlier, you were my lecturer some few years ago at Lagos Business School. So very good to reconnect at this point in time.
Thank you.
Yes. So, you know, as you've said, and I alluded to a little bit in my earlier comments, I think the fact is that COVID has really accelerated the importance and the centrality of the Sustainable Development Goals in terms of just progress for humanity. And of course, at the center of the Sustainable Development Goals is partnerships, you know, aptly illustrated by Goal 17. But there is no doubt, and I really want to reiterate, that the Sustainable Development Goals continue to be a powerful tool for moving forward through COVID and beyond COVID. As I always say, if we didn't have the SDGs to guide the COVID response, we wouldn't be able to keep eye on the multiplicity of focus areas. I know many on the continent are saying this is a difficult, actually a non-existent dilemma, because you have to choose between saving lives and saving livelihoods. In many extent on our continent, the COVID pandemic was, preceded not by the health impact, but by really the socioeconomic impacts as a whole. And again, the SDGs in their thoroughness provide very clear guidelines on what you need to do to provide those social safety nets, to reduce inequalities, to look at gender as an important factor in the rebuild, to look at green solutions in terms of climate and clean green energy, as well as the centrality of the focus, of course, on health and on economic recovery. So, our view is that the SDGs already provide a very strong and clear blueprint for this transformation and this recovery. But the point is, as you alluded to in the question, partnerships are very central to this. No one entity can address either COVID or the promise for humanity on its own. Talked about the multi-stakeholder needs. We need government, we need private sector, we need civil society. But as we do that, I also think there's a framework that we need to look at in terms of how we'll interrelate. Now, I'll just highlight them very quickly. I call them my 3 C's. I think first we need to consult. I think we need to be very sure what it is that we're trying to address and who is in the center of this problem that we're trying to address. And in this instance, it's our citizens, be it small business, be it large business, be it healthcare workers, be it the overall economic infrastructure. But we need to be sure that all of those actors are at the consultation table. Again, to reiterate, I think entities such as the Global Compact Nigeria are part of some of those important platforms to convene around the table. After that, I think what's important is to look at how we can co-create. I think there's fantastic solutions that government brings in terms of the enabling environment and policy and regulation that is required. Private sector can bring innovation, speed to market, technologies. Civil society helps hold us to account and looks at other measures. And I think that is very important. And then we co-create a strong roadmap for recovery around the SDGs. So to your point and your question, partnerships are critical. Let's do it in a consultative manner, and let's do it in the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Professor, please do permit me to interrupt. His Highness Sanusi Lamido Sanusi II has joined us, please. Okay. And I'd like to invite our CEO to welcome His Highness, please. Apologies. Khalid, over to you.
Good afternoon, Your Highness.
Good afternoon, Khalid. Good to talk to you.
It's a great honor to have you with us today. And on behalf of myself, Lafarge Africa, and Lafarge Wholesome, we really welcome you on this roundtable. And we are looking forward for your insights and valuable thoughts that you're going to bring to all of us today. Let me do a very brief introduction of Your Highness, and then the floor will be yours. His Highness Sanusi Lamido Sanusi is a passionate SDG advocate, the only Nigerian on the 17-man list of advocates appointed by the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. He's an accomplished and distinguished professional, and we are most grateful to be honored with your presence today. It's my pleasure once again to call Your Highness to give his goodwill message. Your Highness, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Khalid, and thank you, everyone. And I'm sorry for, first of all, coming late and then barging in. Maybe by way of background, this is the first time I'm in the North since March, and everybody's coming from Kano to see me. I wanted to save them the trouble of coming to Lagos, so I'm really tight for time. Let me say, first of all, that I'd like to congratulate Lafarge for all the work is on SDGs. We have a situation in Nigeria that bothers everyone. People talk about COVID and talk about pre-existing conditions. I would say Nigeria as a country and many African countries already had pre-existing conditions, economic conditions before COVID hit. When you have a country where in some parts, like Zamfara, for example, over 90% are living in extreme poverty. When you have a country where in terms of the population of poor people, we've now overtaken India as the poverty capital of the world. And this was before COVID hit. And when you read all the forecasts of the World Bank that another 5 to 10 million people might be thrown into extreme poverty as a result of COVID, we begin to realize the enormity of the problems that we have. The challenges that we have as a nation around insecurity, herdsmen, farmer clashes, Boko Haram, banditry, most of them have roots in not paying sufficient attention to the SDGs. And I really think that this is a time when we need to have a conversation. When you look at the economic sustainability plan, in terms of its being a fiscal monetary response to a crisis, it meets all the criteria as a counter-cyclical project, but we don't see the SDG component stressed. And there's a great opportunity, I think, as we spend, that we do not just think of reversing a recession, but also laying the foundations for a new type of economy. So when we talk about broadband, which is very good, we talk about having broadband, we should tie broadband to how we can use technology to deliver education, how we can use technology to deliver healthcare. So we maximize the value from our investment. Right now, we're not taking full advantage of the technology that we have and the infrastructure that we have for economic development. I've heard from the last speaker that it's extremely important for all stakeholders to get together. This is something that can no longer be left to the government. The government doesn't even have the balance sheet anyway. The balance sheet is stretched. So much of government revenue is already spent on debt service. There's very little scope for increasing taxes at this point. So the private sector, NGOs, partners will have to come in to address some of the more serious issues, especially around skills, around education, and around health and around healthcare. We have not paid enough attention to certain elements of the SDG. Malnutrition is a big problem. When I look at the numbers, if you look at states like Kano, for example, 58% of all the under 5 children have chronic malnutrition. And this is typical of most of the Northwest and Northeast and a very large part of the country. Now, when you have 1 in 2 children having chronic malnutrition, you can imagine what's going to happen in the next 15, 20 years when they become young people with all the cognitive skill implications of malnutrition. And that is the future that we're building. So I would like to congratulate you for bringing the SDGs to the fore and advocating for them. I would like to assure you that as an advocate, we're here to support all your activities and to add our voice to it. I would like to apologize once more for not being able to stay completely throughout because of the schedule that I'm running, but this was so important to me that I said I had to break and come in and show my face, give my goodwill message, encourage you. And I do hope that I will have a recording of this when it is over so I can listen to all the speakers and also give you any feedback after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Highness, and we much appreciate your time. We know your intensive commitment during the current situation and your continuous traveling between the regions. So we much appreciate your time, your valuable insights, and we continuously look forward to further cooperation and relation with Your Highness going forward. Lafarge Africa, guided by Lafarge Wholesome as a group, with all its initiatives, will be shared with you in your regions, and we capitalize on your presence, your input, your value in taking the sustainable development goals forward in Nigeria. So we thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you very much soon.
Thank you very much, Khalid. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Highness.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Highness, for the insightful message. And one of the takeaways we should bear in mind is that we can use technology today to deliver on many of these issues. Education, health, even agriculture. And one of the reasons why why technology should be at the forefront is that we have a young population. And technology is the language of the young people. Thank you very much, Your Highness. Is Mahmoud Mohammed with us? Has he reconnected?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me now, and I hope Murphy has gone away so that I can talk to you guys again.
Thank you very much. So I'm sure you still remember the question.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the chance again. Apologies for the really bad connection, but it actually points to some of the issues that His Royal Highness has raised, because technology has to be part of the solution for education as we move on to the SDG and in the approach to the SDG 4 that we're discussing. So as part of the answer to the question, you mentioned that the Federal Ministry of Education has developed a ministerial strategic plan, the MSP, and it has been mainstreamed into the EGRP. That's one. Secondly, in achieving the 2030 agenda, we're looking at programs that give access to a homegrown feeding program to increase enrollment, which this government has put forward from 2015. Reducing the out-of-school children is a major pillar in the strategic plan. And looking at the population of Nigeria, most 50%, actually 50% of the population is under 25. So it's essentially within the focus of education sector, the education sector, to really look at this and try to get these programs up and about. So the Better Education Service Delivery for All, BESDA, is part of the programs put forward to address the agenda going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can I switch over to Magali Anderson? My question is, Lafayette Wholesale has been at the forefront of the development of carbon neutral solutions through innovation and R&D. This singular initiative can be marked against at least 5 of the SDGs: SDG 9, SDG 11, SDG 12, SDG 15. What are the immediate impacts of these interventions for building sustainable and resilient communities? Are there experiences that developing countries can glean from considering Lafayette Wholesale investments in this space?
Thank you.
Sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life on land, sorry. So over to you.
Thank you, Professor. Before I answer your question, I would like to express how happy and honored I am to be with you today in such a great company of distinguished panelists. I'm also very happy to participate because, as you mentioned when you introduced me, I spent many years in Nigeria, Wari in the Delta to be specific. And it's a country that has always remained very, very close to my heart and where I always enjoy coming back. And as I was saying earlier to highlight, unfortunately, it takes the COVID to keep me away from you, but as soon as I can, I will be so happy to come back. But now let's go to your question. You know, I think today there is a crisis, there is all the things we are talking about, but in the case of Lafayette Wholesale, our effort in sustainability and building a better world, we mentioned Build Back Better earlier, it's not recent. It's something we've been doing for many, many years. If I talk about CO2 alone, we have been reducing our impact on CO2 by about 27% since 1990. So it's an effort that we understand very well. And, but also we are in the very technical world. And earlier, Sundar Jambo and His Highness mentioned innovation and how the private sector has to bring innovation. In our case, in our industry, innovation is extremely important because, you know, sometimes I think I would love to be in a company where I could put few solar panels in the roof and call myself climate neutral. Well, that doesn't happen like that with us. And to reach the result we want, we have to spend a lot of research and development. And this is why we need all this innovation. We need all these young spirits. We need all these startups. About 50% of our resources today and 40% of our patents are into low carbon, circular economy, etc. We are having few products now. We can do cement with construction demolition waste. We have a cement called Sustaino. You might have heard of our 14 Trees collaboration where we do houses with Durabrick blocks, which is made of compressed earth and cement. It's actually, so we make those houses, it's called 14 Trees because we don't need to burn them. So we save the burning of 14 trees every time we make a house. So we've been working on all of this. And for me, when going back to this crisis, I think the crisis is a tragic wave and that we have to handle. But it's also an eye-opener to the tsunami that is right behind coming to us if we don't do anything for the climate change. And I think the SDG goals are such an important thing. Actually, when we look at what we do as a company overall, we are far close. You know, you mentioned 5 goals that are very important to us where we can have a big impact, but we actually touched 14 out of the 17 goals. And going back to the question on how do we get together, I think what is very important is that we all work together. So I can make the lowest carbon cement, but at the end of the day, it's a built environment that you want to be more resilient and lower carbon. So we need to work for the entire value chain from the designers all the way to the makers, to the people who are building. And we are one chain at the middle of that, an important one, because of course we produce the building material, but it's so important we work together over the value chain, but also with governments and policymakers. Some of the things that stop us is the policy making. Let me maybe give you a quick example. One of the ways for us to reduce the CO2 is to replace our fossil fuels by waste, biomass, and things like that that we upcycle part of our process. So this is super important, but it's a complete win-win situation. However, we need to be able to collect that waste, have access to that waste, and bring it to our kiln, which is in some places more difficult than others. The other example I could give you is, I mentioned that we do cement now with where we insert directly demolition waste inside our cement. So we do it we do it in this project called Sustaino, and we are more than 20% of this waste, which is replacing cement. So any waste that replace cement, obviously we lower the requirement for resources, we lower the CO2 that we need to make the cement, or I should say the clinker. And but again, today we are being blocked, not for technical reason, but because the legislation is not helping us to develop that product, because we cannot make it with more than, I think it's about 20% in Switzerland, for example. So I really truly think that, again, to a bit conclude in what I've been saying, I think the private sector, and particularly Lafarge Holcim, we are ready for the challenge. we are putting many resources, and we've had example of what is happening in Nigeria. We are putting a lot of resources into it, but we will really scale it up to what you mentioned the word humanity, Sanda, and it's a word that I like to use, because I used to say we want to save the planet, but in fact, the planet, we don't need to save it, we need to save humanity. Planet will always survive. So I think that if we want to scale it up and make the impact that we need to make, this is by having the type of people we have in this panel working together, discussing and finding solutions together. So that's why I'm so happy to be in that panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this stage, I would like to bring in Sanda again. My question you to address to the audience and enlighten us: the need to strengthen collaborative opportunities have now become imperative. You actually stated it in your initial remark. In the light of celebrating United Nations Global Compact 20 years of action, what recommendations will you suggest for adoption amongst Nigerian stakeholders to accelerate action that propels greater impact that is scalable? What is the power of partnership as a mechanism, the intrinsic added value it brings towards delivering the SDGs, and how will each individual partner gain net value from this participation?
Thank you for that question.
Your own recommendation that will help us move forward.
Absolutely, and lots of questions in that main question. Let me attempt to tackle them. But I'll bounce off actually from what His Highness said in his comments to us. You know, no one entity can achieve these challenges on their own. And as you mentioned, we recently celebrated at the United Nations Global Compact 20 years. And our theme for 20 years was a very apt reflection on the past and the forward, which is for us, uniting business for a better world. And for us, that unity really is, again, that platform that we're talking about and those partnerships for moving forward. Now, I think the key question here is, how do we make these partnerships impactful and scalable? Because the challenges at hand for humanity are indeed significant. And I really think that that's where a different kind of partnership and a very intentional partnership is required. Once we're clear that no one entity can solve today's problems together, I think we should also be clear that perhaps there's no one entity that will gain significantly from another in partnering. As I said earlier, I think all partnerships need to have a clear understanding of who is the person in the middle and what is the problem that we're trying to understand. I think partnerships need to start from a premise of mutuality. It's not a winner takes all, but it's really, if we can all win, everybody can have it all. So I think those are some of the very important premises that we need to have. But what kind of conversations I think need to happen, and how can we scale this? I think sometimes, one of the biggest challenges to successful and scalability in terms of partnerships is whether or not in the first instance we actually have a shared and mutual vision. You know, be it a better Nigeria, a stronger or more resilient private sector, or enhanced national progress towards achieving the SDGs. I think it's very important to ensure that there's a mutuality in that shared and joint vision. It's a very important point of departure. Another thing is trust. And sometimes it's taken lightly, but it's very interesting. There's a survey, which I'm sure many of you may read or look at often. It's called the Edelman Survey. And Edelman produces an annual survey on perceptions of entities. And at the core of it is trust. And it's a survey that aims to look at people's perceptions of private sector, of government, of media, et cetera, and key partners. And over time, it shifts. But I think what we learned from Edelman, and certainly what we learned from Edelman just towards the middle of the COVID crisis, was that trust in corporate leadership was slightly on the decline, primarily because it was felt that perhaps corporate leaders were not putting the customer or their staff at the center, and perhaps leading more with their profit motive. But either way, whoever's around the table, be it government, be it corporate, be it civil society, trust is important. Without trust, you won't partner well, and you certainly will not be able to deliver on impact. I think it's important to acknowledge entities have different ways of working. Government certainly works different from private sector, from civil society. But again, once we're clear on the mutuality, I think that is a very good starting point. Of course, clear governance structures. But one thing I really must highlight here in terms of forging forward on some of these very big issues that we have to tackle is, what does success look like? And, you know, we need to pay a really keen eye on how we're defining what success is, how we're going to monitor and evaluate that. Some things are urgent and pressing. In many countries, the COVID response forged forward. We saw people come together very quickly, mobilizing resources externally and internally to drive COVID forward. But I think we now need to ask ourselves, especially now that we know the pandemic is here for the long term, what does success look like for us? Are we looking now at strengthened health systems? Are we looking at lives saved? Are we looking at getting small and medium enterprises back on their feet? Are we looking at more inclusive access to finance? I think we just need to be very clear when you're tackling these large problems, what are you tackling in what sequence and what does success look like? Now, at the Global Compact, because I must offer a useful resource, we've developed a tool. It's a 10-step guide to developing and sustaining partnerships. And I think it's a tool that we've also encouraged our local networks to adopt and use. It gives guidance on how to collaborate across sectors and of course to collaborate within the UN. Again, you can find it on the UNGC website. But I really just do want to stress that scalable and impactful partnerships have to start with two things. One, with the problem clearly defined in the center, and secondly, with a very clear idea of what success looks like. So that we're very clear what we're doing and what we're measuring to achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Now, my next question is to Mahmoud. I hope you can hear me, and your internet is still on.
Okay, don't make you go off. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. The concluded voluntary national review emphasized the need for deliberate impact assessments and reporting. What imperatives will you recommend for adoption in Nigeria to strengthen the reporting indices, especially in the education sector? What partnership opportunities do you think should be leveraged for more goal-oriented partnership between the private and the public sector for more impact?
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to take off actually from what Sandra had mentioned with regards to defining these roles in terms of private sector, government, and so on. Because what I discovered coming in 4 years ago is that data was or is still a very major problem in the education sector in two areas. Firstly, there's not really a lack of it. There's a lack of order for it. So yes, there's really a need to define the problem properly, and then to also, I must say, simplify the result mode, because part of what that brings us to is that the target audience, if you wish, I find it very difficult to understand the information that you want to put forward and say, okay, here's a problem. For instance, talking to the state governments, and then if you have a data set that has 30 odd fields that people need to pay attention to, it becomes quite difficult to put that information in perspective for so many different stakeholders. So I think that the simplification, if you wish, of the data indices has to be looked at in terms of where we're going with all of the data sets we're getting from different organizations, government, CSOs, the United Nations, and so on. Okay, and secondly, technology. We can't do without it. We need to improve the accessibility of information. We need to improve the collection mode, because there's still a lot of physical collection that is going on. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources, and I think we can improve that by looking at technology. Now, in terms of that, looking at partnerships, for instance, the infrastructure to look at the last mile, because the majority of the population of Nigeria is rural, and as such, using technology to reach out becomes a challenge. But having said that, we've arrived at a telecommunication position that I think we can talk to the telecom companies, for instance, just to give an example, to help us out in this regard. So it's a good track to explore, and I can say the Federal Ministry of Education is actually looking at that. I can't say much right now because we haven't really arrived at final plans for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to bring in Magali at this stage. How has the urgency of the crisis changed the way of forging multi-stakeholder partnership? And now some of the COVID crisis that hit us, what can we learn from the experience in order to be able to partner more rapidly for better recovery?
So, I think the changes started a little bit before the crisis. If you look at what happened in the last 18 months to 2 years, the raising of the awareness about what was happening, about how climate change is accelerating. And, I could talk about the Greta Thunberg movement and all the young people that she has been bringing behind her. I think we all have a Greta Thunberg at home somewhere. And that's been very important. We have seen that change. So I think the crisis has amplified that and make us realize that we have to build back better, but also not just externally, but also internally. Our people want a purpose. They don't just want to work for a company anymore. They want a company with a purpose. So I think all of this has been great eye-opener and has really amplified it. But we also know we can't do it by ourselves. Lafarge was saying we are a big global group, but we are not. We are a multiplication of local businesses. And it's really what's happening at the local level that is important, much more than anything else. And this is where we need to build up those partnerships. Again, we didn't wait for the crisis to build those partnerships, but I think the crisis has been an amplifier. That's really how I would call it, on how we need to build those, how we need to have those partnerships, but also was a good, I don't know, good if it's a word, and opportunity is definitely not the right word, but it was a way to look at what can we do, who are we, what is our role in that community where we work and where we operate. And we've done a lot of things in Nigeria, but also in many countries, such as giving our, our ready-mix concrete trucks, putting them in villages to help sanitize. And I think it was a moment where we all had to think and say, okay, there is a business is important, but there's something much more important happening right now. And what can we do? What is our role in that? And, the crisis is tragic, but I truly believe that hopefully one day we will get out of it. We don't know how long it will last, we know that, but today we look at it and we look back. I do hope that the Build Back Better will not be just an hashtag, will be a true realization that who we are, what we are, why we need a purpose in life, and creating a true movement that way.
Thank you. I have one last round of questions before I throw it open to our audience. Now, Sandra, my last question to you. Beyond strategic partnerships and collaborative opportunities, how can private sector organizations better co-create value for the SDGs?
Thank you. Again, beyond partnerships, I say, what else can we really do? I think it's the age-old question of what do you really do on the ground? How do you deliver impact? And how do you move from policy, policy documents, strategy documents to real outcomes? And I think Magali has really highlighted some of the key and strategic outcomes that Lafarge has been able to deliver, both in terms of response, but also from the general work that you do. Now, in terms of co-creation, for me, again, I will go back to the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think they're a fundamental framework that we must always use to guide what we do in this quest to create a better world for business and a better world for humanity. I think that some of the issues and some of the outcomes that businesses need to look at right now are really driven by those goals. And it also provides a very broad continuum for interaction and for business outcomes. Let me just pick one goal, for example, that I think is critical to us, or certainly on the continent. And let me look at goal 2 on agriculture, and what opportunities and what co-creation can really be driven by that. At the heart of it, you'll say agriculture is simply about addressing food security. But I think if we look all across, what are the value addition opportunities that can really be provided? What are the inclusivity opportunities that can be provided? What can you shift by creating access to financing that allows farmers to get their quality inputs and seeds at affordable rates? What can you do by facilitating access to markets that allows farmers to get their outputs to the market on time and get a price? What gains can you then generate, for example, by making sure that there's adequate infrastructure, be it road infrastructure, be it telecommunications infrastructure to allow price transparency, et cetera, all through the agricultural value chain. So for me, I think once you take a value chain approach to many of the business issues that we look at, it's very clear that you actually unleash a lot more than what every single individual entity in that value chain would be able to do. And I think for me, that's what I think a whole of business, a whole of value chain approach between private sector, I think will really co-create and unleash additional value. I think there's good work that is ongoing, but I think that private sector companies now really need to look at how they can collaborate and actually generate more outputs, more profits, because certainly purpose-led businesses are also profitable businesses, and together really shift what outcomes for business look like. And I say this not lightly, and I'm sure even colleagues from Lafarge may attest, it does take a very enlightened leadership. It takes very concerted board effort. It takes management to really shift the narrative about what a successful business looks like. But stock exchanges, history, anecdotes demonstrate to us that the businesses that are more sustainable over the long term are businesses that are able to co-create to address societal challenges, as well as operate obviously as principle-led and purpose-led businesses. So for me, really, it's about unleashing additional value for the business as well as for society.
Thank you very much for that insight. And Mahmoud, my last question, the post-ARGP, National Development Plan 2021 to 2030, will be pivotal in advancing the achievement of the SDGs in Nigeria. What focus areas can be explored by private-public partnerships, particularly in the education sector?
Okay. Thank you very much. To jump in directly, firstly, facilitation of physical infrastructure for expansion of equitable access to education. I think that's a major part. And we can't talk about education in Nigeria without talking about more money. Yes, there's a need to put in a lot more money in education that is available either to government. His Royal Highness did mention generally about the problem. And the deployment of education, I've mentioned part of that, definitely, especially with the pandemic that has emphasized this. When we were working on the emergency response a couple of months, March, we realized that even if you treat COVID as a pandemic right now, the reality as you look at what's happening across the world is that we have to adjust to the new normal, and that means in terms of technology, in terms of learning systems, a lot of research has to go in to say, how do we now learn better with the reality of social distancing, or whatever we come up with as a solution in the future. But certainly the drastic changes in terms of the needs for infrastructure, in terms of physical infrastructure, technology, and devices come into play. But again, the challenge has increased because now we're not working with just existing plants. We have to come up with new ones to address these issues. So the MSP is going to have to improve, should I say, be updated to ensure will be reflected in the future within the period of the agenda. So yeah, the private sector can also look at Adopt a School initiative and providing clean energy solutions for schools. Especially in the rural area. Internet infrastructure that I've mentioned previously. Unfortunately, I am a technology person, so that means I focus. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. And my last question for Ali, how could impact investing in a post-pandemic era be better leveraged? Are there strategies you will recommend for impact assessment targeted at corporate social investments that are designed for the long term based on your experience, Lafarge, and other organizations that you're aware of?
Thank you so much, Chris. It's a very valid question, and I will repeat part of what Magali has earlier mentioned, that in Lafarge Wholesome, it's not something that has been triggered by the COVID-19 or the recent challenges. Even before the merge, whether on the level of Lafarge or the level of Wholesome, and then it became a greater magnitude and force when both companies has merged. Both companies and now Lafarge Wholesome has been developing a lot of sustainable initiatives when it comes to helping the environment and seeking better sustainability. We always use the slogan of, despite the fact that you want to make business today, you still have to reserve the nature for the generations to come. So there is quite a balance between what we do today in terms of investment profitability and really preserving the environments, our stakeholders and communities. Back to your question, and here I would refer back to Lafarge Wholesome, Lafarge Africa in particular. The main area of assessment here is how we can better use the alternative fuel and waste management in bringing a significant impact on our current environments. And this is one of the domains that we believe that could be a quick win. This assessment has been going on for years and years. It has been developed in the US within Lafarge Wholesome, taken to Europe, and I think now the potential in Africa and Nigeria is massive. Lafarge Africa is heavily engaged in the waste management and at different levels, whether from the recyclable plastic waste management, from the biomass, from the oil sludge, and using a partnership with the oil and gas companies in the country in utilizing the sludge as energy. That's on the operational side. We are introducing heavily new technologies in our plants to reduce CO2 emissions and other impacts on the communities that we are operating on. Moving forward to the front end as well, the type of products that we're developing now, whether on green concrete or less CO2 components in cement, is very important when we're assessing the impact on our environments as well. So when we look now at Lafarge Wholesome initiatives on the world, we can talk about affordable housing, which has less component of CO2 emission, recyclable materials from the waste of the concrete on demolished products. We can look at the 3D printing as a new technology that we really need to bring to Africa as part of a fast and a quick solutions for poor areas, helping restructuring certain areas where poverty is very high, living standards are very low, density of people is extremely high. And if we apply here the classical or conventional way of construction, it's going to take years and years and years. So if we look at the 3D printing as one of the initiatives, for instance, it's a very quick solution. But again, as a summary of what all the panelists have mentioned, it's not a one-man show, it's not a one corporate show. I think we need to do three main things, and I've been taking some of the notes out of the valuable insights of everybody around the table. I always promote in other webinars and here and last week, we need to commercialize the sustainable development. We need to bring a commercial element to these initiatives. So we are more pragmatic in the way we want to take it forward in the commercial market. So whether through direct or indirect incentives, this is one element. We have to discriminate positively when it comes to fair competition. So how can we segregate between companies willing to invest millions and millions of dollars to improve sustainability in their working environment vis-a-vis companies who are really sluggish or falling behind or are not interested? This is the second point. The third point is, I think we need to have a more concrete structure of cooperation. There must be a framework, because here I think we have a lot of efforts which is more on silos or a standalone. And I'm talking particularly in Nigeria here, since the event is related mainly to Lafarge Africa in Nigeria. I think we need to have more cooperation, more consolidation of our efforts. We need to create a platform where government, NGOs, UN, private sector has to come in one concrete platform, and we start driving it forward. As long as we are operating in silos, everybody will be putting massive efforts, but I think the results will be very slow. We need to merge the energies, the efforts, and bring it to one STEAM organization that can really develop sustainable development and taking it forward. So commercializing the product is very important. Collective effort in a recognizable, tangible platform is one important element. But back to Lafarge Africa, I think we have started in 4 or 5 years before in waste management in particular, and we have a lot of initiatives. 4 plants we have in Nigeria, 2 of them runs on 30% on alternative fuels, all coming from waste materials. We have solid partnership with a lot of conglomerate companies operating in Nigeria. We take their waste and we use it as part of our fuel. And we have a lot of potential plans for the years to come as well.
Thank you very much, Khalid El-Bukhari, for the insights. And I'm sure many of us will take away some useful tips. But one of the most important statements that we should take away from your comment is that the need for us to commercialize sustainability. Kind of incentive, the need for a platform where public, private, and social players can come together, see how they can make sustainable development come to life. I would like to now throw the question and answers open to participants. Please use the Q&A box to type in your questions, and I will direct the questions to whomever I feel is in a position to answer it. I have one question here from Olorufemi. It appears that the pandemic has triggered inequalities more between nations, groups, and individuals. In building back better, which I rather say build forward better, how can corporations manage this to integrate more transformative solutions? So building back is building back or building forward better. So how can cooperation, that's cooperating, not organization, how cooperating among different players manage to integrate more transformative solutions. So can I ask Sandra to have a crack at that?
Absolutely, thank you. Very, very important question. In fact, it resonates with the upcoming theme of the UN at 75, which is really about promoting inclusive and renewed multilateralism, essentially the basis for international cooperation. I think as the person who asked the question has recognized, you know, COVID brought with us the shutting down of a number of barriers, not just simply the geographic barriers. We saw the impact on global supply chains. We've seen the impact on movement and migration. You know, we've seen the impact that that has had on economies as a whole. You know, for those who are importers and exporters, I'm sure we've certainly felt the pinch. So in this building forward better, I think, you know, a renewed commitment to international cooperation, a renewed commitment to multilateralism is absolutely critical to moving the world forward and really igniting business opportunities. So, you know, I think we have to take a multi-level focus. Indeed, there's a lot of economic regeneration that needs to happen within economies. But I also do hope that regions, first of all, you know, we have a lot of regional economic entities where trade and business is key, but also, you know, globally, that we can begin to open those borders and open all of those positive elements that really keep business and trade stimulated. I think for us, you know, one of the very key things we saw at the onset of the pandemic was simply how supply chains were fractured and the fragility. But, you know, let's not look at the supply chain simply as a large company. Somewhere down that continuum is a small SME who was providing an important input that ran their business. And that's where the pinch has really been felt. So, as I said, economic regeneration in country and globally are critical. Again, a key theme for the UN at 75, inclusive multilateralism.
Thank you very much. I have a question here. What are the factors stifling effective collaboration among stakeholders, and what needs to be done to foster such effective collaboration? Think, let's zero in more Nigeria. See, what are those factors that are actually stifling effective collaboration? Can I ask Mahmoud to have a crack at that? You've stressed the need for playing significant role in helping with infrastructure.
Chris, I knew you were going to pick on me. Yeah, thank you very much. I think definitely, as Khalid has mentioned earlier, there is a need to unify in terms of the approach, because unless we do that, we can't really get very good results in terms of the amount. If you compare the amount of resources put into the SDGs by very different groups, the results are not commensurate. So definitely the first part is really the structure to come together. And I think government has to play a very major role in this part, because as the many organized with legal backing, I think that has to come up. But the conversation has to pick up a bit faster. The reality we're in has really changed to economic the issues in spoken to a lot of that, and I don't want to have to repeat that. Yeah.
Okay, Sandra, do you have any thoughts on that? Based on your experience in Kenya, having worked extensively at Safaricom on factors that tend to stifle collaboration.
Yeah, thank you. And take me back one row back. I'll go back to, I think, the point I raised earlier. Is there a mutual agreement on what is the problem that we're aiming to achieve? I think also something that I forgot to mention earlier is also, you know, a number of these actors actually speak a different language. And I think for those who've been engaged in the SDGs, certainly, you know, translating business understanding of metrics and KPIs and success outcomes to UN understanding and vice versa has also been really critical. So, and I think tremendous progress has been made in that regard. It's been really exciting to see a number of companies be able to really take the SDGs and integrate them into their business language and vice versa. But again, what are those factors that stifle collaboration? For me is lack of clarity on a common vision. Again, trust, not to be taken for granted. Thirdly, agreement on whether or not there's a clear picture of success and how that success is going to be monitored and evaluated. I think also when you look at areas where we're trying to drive innovation, you know, sometimes people move at different paces. And I think just understanding speed, pace, technology, opportunities, I think is really important. But I think fundamental is the world is calling for a different kind of partnership. One that I think is exemplified, you know, in many ways, very strongly by the developer community, innovators, young people, you know, organizations that take on agile approaches to problem solving. Lots of really good examples abound. And I think there's lots of opportunities to learn from those who've been successful in this area. Thank you.
There's a question here for Khaled. In terms of commercializing sustainable development, are there examples of countries that are already adopting this strategy?
Well, the real example that crosses my mind now is when I was living in the US and they wanted to encourage the solar panel to reduce electricity from the government. So part of the commercialization that if you invest in a solar panel in your plant or at your house, and you generate excess electricity generated, you can sell it back to the government or to the state. And not only that you can sell back excess power, but any power that you use which saves from the state power or the grid power, you're positively compensated for it. So when they decided that they want to go environmentally clean on power, for instance, on electricity, solar panel as an option. And if everybody remembers 20 years ago or 25 years ago, if you wanted to do a solar panel facility in your house or in a plant, it was extremely expensive. The payback commercially was almost impossible because you're looking at 50 years and so on. So only heavy industry at that time could have afforded to go for that. But when they wanted really to commercialize it on a retail level, so the local house owners can go into the segment, they start positively compensating them, not only for the excess power that they can generate for the state or the government, but only for the savings of the electricity that they are not consuming from the grid by installing the solar panel. So that's the really example I have in mind right now. And I think this model can be replicated on anything. So for companies that can reduce their waste that goes in non-renewable or non-recyclable streams, and they can track it, the state or the government or the Ministry of Industry, for instance, if a company managed to reduce its regular waste by 10% by finding a source of using this waste in a more clean, sustainable streams, these companies can be compensated, whether by using the income tax reduction, by using positive discrimination advantages, and so on and so forth. So there could be a lot of scenarios for commercializing the products, and back again to creating this one common platform, because this is not only a private sector wish or an NGO recommendation. It has to be collaborated by the governments, by the states, by the tax authorities, by the ministers who are responsible for these domains. And I think it can be commercialized and to the beneficial win-win situation for everybody.
Thank you very much. This question is for Magali. How is Lafarge Africa working at meeting the SDGs?
So for Lafarge Africa, I can talk better about Lafarge Holcim, and Khaled can certainly talk better than me about Lafarge Africa.
Okay,
And
maybe Khalid will help you out when you get.
no, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the activities we have are covering a lot of these goals. Today, if you know, we are a very local business. So in many places, our cement plant, our big cement plant, will be the only industrial employer for the entire area. And in many of these places, we have families working in it. You know, the grandfather was working there, the father was working there, the son, the daughter. And our responsibility goes way beyond just producing cement. Our responsibility is to be a good citizen for the environment where we work. So to give you, I will just give you a few numbers that come off my head, but most companies would have clinics in their plant because they need to take care of their employees if the employees hurt themselves. I don't know if there's many companies that have clinics that takes care not only of the employees, but also of the relative of the employee, of the community. I visit clinics where we have facilities to get women delivering, which is like, it's got nothing to do with the cement plant, but it's fantastic because we are there to offer all this support to the communities. So last year, we gave healthcare to about 250,000 people who were not our employees, who were outside our employee bandwidths. And so we do for education, we do run schools in a lot of places where we are, because we're in places where it's not necessarily good to have school. And we've talked a lot about, to be sustainable, what we do has to also bring value to the company. It has to be a full win-win. So when we run a school, we could say, oh, it's a very generous thing, but it's also, we do that because we need people to educate children so they come and work for us later. We need to create that talent pool. It's important for us. And this is when we have this type of win-win that I think we can really, that the work we are doing becomes completely sustainable over a long duration of time. So, and maybe I will let Khaled complete if you want to say something more particular about Lafarge Africa.
Thank you so much, Magali. As we always say, I mean, most of the initiatives on Lafarge Holcim as a group is a collective know-how, knowledge, experience of the local companies that we have across the group, across the globe. In Nigeria, we focus on more on 4 domains. That's what we believe that we have a significant impact on. Education, this is one of the main elements that we are focusing on. We also go up to the level to make the context on a countrywide. We give prizes, we make big events of enhancing education and improving the level of education in Nigeria. The health and safety part, which is one of the main domains that we look at, and starts from how we operate our quarries, how we manage our plantation around the plants, how we manage our water treatment, reduce water waste, recycling waters. This is one of the main areas that we look at. We look at our infrastructure, how we can produce products which has less CO2 emission. How can we produce more green products in our industry? This is the 3rd element. The 4th element, which is now really taking big part of our focus and effort and investment, is around alternative fuel and waste management. We believe that we can manage our plants with at least 50% using alternative fuels. So we can reduce carbon, we can reduce coal, we can reduce gas by at least 50% of our consumption over the coming 10 years, which is meeting the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals objectives. And I believe that if we managed, and that's one of the key objectives of Lafarge Africa in Nigeria, is how we can replace energy by more sustainable means using alternative fuel and waste management. So these are the four main domains that we focus here. We have a lot of bits and pieces here and there, but I would rather really give the four big tickets where we are extremely proud that we are putting a fingerprint of Lafarge Africa, especially in the states and the governorates where we are operating.
Thank you very much. Time is not our friend. I would like to give the panelists to give us their parting shots. Just a brief comment from each of the panelists. Let's start with Sandra.
Thank you. First, it's been such an insightful discussion. Really learned a lot from all of the distinguished panelists and great questions. Mine really is to say for companies, those who may be here listening, I think the Global Compact Network Nigeria is a platform where you could be able to find the resources, the tools, the partnerships to address many of the issues we've talked about here: collaboration, opportunities to build forward better, opportunities to see how your business can address the sustainable development goals. So I truly hope that you will, seize the example that Lafarge has certainly set. They are a fantastic trendsetter in the industry and around SDGs, and join the Global Compact Network Nigeria and make use of the fantastic resources that we have at hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Magali?
Thank you. So,
last comment.
Yeah, so was very happy to participate and very impressed by the level of comments and questions that I've heard today. As you said earlier, I used to be head of health and safety, and I always say when something tragic happened, it's a tragedy, but it's also an opportunity to learn. And I think we are there today. We have a fantastic opportunity in front of us to transform ourselves. And because no one can ignore it, it's no more one person playing and the others and trying to convince everybody. No one can ignore that crisis we are all going through. And I think even the most reluctant people are now understanding why it's so important to act. So we have an incredible opportunity right here, right now, to make things move. And it would be really an enormous mistake we would all collectively make if we didn't take that opportunity and make things happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mahmoud?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really impressed by the level of conversation on this. And I'd like to say that I hope that there'll be more of this, not less, and hopefully that we'll have a template to get the takeaways from this moving forward. And also I hope that Lafarge, Khaled and Magali and everybody else will get in contact so that we can talk a bit more about a sustainable way to build better schools.
Thank you very much. And Khaled, give us your parting shots.
Well, I mean, first of all, I want to extend my deepest appreciation for all the panelists around the table. His Excellency, of course, Sanda, Magali, Mohammed, you, Chris. It's been very fruitful, very insightful. We are running this webinars every Wednesday until September the 9th. So we have multiple events. We choose the panelists that really can bring value, bring insights, like what happened today. I think what we have learned and we can do in the future is invaluable, and we can really bring sustainable development into a significant milestone ahead. So I want to thank you all. It's been a great pleasure, and we're really looking forward to hosting more and more panelists that can bring value to our objectives in the country and across the globe. Finally, I want to thank Lafarge Holcim, represented by Magali. It's a big help and support for a country like Nigeria with the size of our business to have all the support coming from the group, all the know-how, all the learnings, all the technologies. Sanda from the United Nations, of course, your contribution is invaluable, and we really look forward to strengthen the relation within Nigeria, and definitely as part of a bigger group, we can extend this knowledge to our sister companies in Kenya, in South Africa, and I'll leave it to Magali to choose the countries that we really can expand and bring value. Mohammed, much appreciate your presence. I know your valuable time. Our great sincere appreciation to His Excellency the Minister, and we really look forward to meeting with you very soon and bring these steps more and more tangible on the ground for the benefit of the country and the regions. Chris, much appreciated. You always welcome us with your insights and coordination, so much appreciate your presence.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our panelists. They have shown that they're actually thought leaders. And before I dismiss them and allow them to go and stretch their legs, just to recap on some of the issues that have been thrown up today. If I start with the goodwill message from His Royal Highness, he made it clear to actually give us painted a picture of before COVID, Nigeria became the poverty capital of the world. And that is not acceptable. And we have all these social problems because we have not actually implemented a lot of the SDGs. That government cannot do it alone because government revenue is challenged. But we need to be serious in driving SDGs, and technology can help us in doing that. And the panelists, starting with Sandra, let us realize that partnership is critical. But for partnership to actually succeed, you must have a win-win mindset, and we need to have shared and mutual vision, have trust, and agree on what success will look like if we're going to drive partnership and collaboration effectively. That we can use the SDGs as a guide while we are co-creating. And co-creation could be more effective if we look at it from the perspective of value chain or looking at the ecosystem. And Mahmoud highlighted the issue of how technology can actually help us in solving this problem, particularly in the education sector. And that data collection, data mining to help us tell the right stories is important. And again, technology can help us in ensuring that this is done, bearing in mind that the bulk of our population lives in the rural area. Finance is critical. We're not spending enough on education. Again, government cannot do all. So partnership from the private sector, the social sector, in terms of generating or helping with providing infrastructure in schools could help in that gap in driving the SDGs on the educational front. And Magali actually shared a lot of experience of what Lafayette Wholesome is doing, and that Lafayette actually touches on 14 of the 17 SDGs, which is interesting notes. But that collaboration along the value chain is important, and that we can actually use waste as they are doing in Lafayette to drive the business, which means that waste is not just something that we use to litter the environment, but can actually be converted into something that we use in creating value in the business. Alternative fuel or energy. There is a need for us to commercialize sustainability. The right incentives is there, and competitiveness will actually be meaningful if we commercialize sustainability. The need to have a more concrete structure and framework for this collaboration to happen, and the need for a platform where public, private, and social players can come together. So the message is collaboration, collaboration, that we can do it. And for me, the key message for top leadership, particularly both in the private sector, is that this is a time for leadership to move from competitive leadership to collaborative leadership, because that requires a different mindset. So thank you very much. Thank the panelists for the brilliant work they've done today, the insights they have thrown up. And I thank Lafarge Africa for making this possible. This is a conversation that has just started, and I hope we'll have more of this kind of conversation, but most importantly, how we can move from conversation to action. Thank you very much. Over to you, Shade.
Thank you so much, Professor. I think both yourself and Khalid and our thought leaders, our esteemed thought leaders, and His Highness has said it all. Distinguished participants, thank you all very much for attending. And I really like that word, from discussion or conversation to action. That's guaranteed. And that's the whole essence and premise of why we're having this webinar series. So we look forward to the next 2 sessions. And do join us this same time next week, please, as Khalid mentioned. And we look forward to having more conversations we intend to turn into actions. Do have a good afternoon, everybody. And thank you all once again. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.